Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, Russia intensifying its invasion in Ukraine amid fears Vladimir Putin may use chemical or biological weapons. Here at home, gas prices and inflation still rising. We're going to take a look at the various ideas being offered from Republicans and Democrats to help to ease the pressure. Plus, Russian President Vladimir Putin may be upset with his military for its failures in the battle against Ukraine.
More likely and more troubling, I think Russia might use low-yield nuclear weapons, not as a demonstration, but to change the balance of power on the conventional battlefield.
We have more on how this could possibly escalate the war and see how the military is working with other nations around the world to help promote security. Then later, a heartwarming reunion after narrowly escaping the war in Ukraine. All these stories and more are coming up next from the CBN Newsroom.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thank you so much for joining us. After 2 weeks, Moscow's invasion of Ukraine is growing more brutal. A Russian airstrike has devastated a maternity hospital in the port city of Mariupol. Now there are concerns Vladimir Putin is ready to use chemical and biological weapons. Meanwhile, talks between the foreign ministries of Russia and Ukraine today failed to reach a deal. Heather Sells has our report.
A series of blasts hit the Mariupol hospital complex Wednesday, blowing out windows, leaving behind an enormous crater and killing 3, including a child. A mother wailing as she clutched her little one while paramedics evacuated the wounded. The World Health Organization says 18 medical facilities have been attacked since the Russian invasion began. The president of Ukraine posting video and calling it an atrocity. President Biden's press secretary condemned the attack.
As a mother, I know a number of you are mothers yourself. It is horrifying to see the type of the barbaric use of military force to go after innocent civilians in a sovereign country.
The Russians have blockaded Mariupol while continuing to shell it. Before and after satellite images show extensive damage. The people have been without water and power for more than a week, and authorities say one child has already died from dehydration. The capital of Kyiv faces a similar crisis.
With supplies being cut off, it will become somewhat desperate in, I would say, 10 days to 2 weeks.
They want us to feel like animals because they blocked our cities, the biggest cities in Ukraine, and they blocked and because they don't want our people to get some food, water.
On Wednesday, new ceasefires allowed thousands of civilians to escape some of the more heavily hit towns around Kyiv. Meanwhile, the U.S. has rejected Poland's surprise offer. It proposed Tuesday to transfer its MiG fighter jets to the U.S. to hand over to Ukraine.
We stress that we do not support the transfer of additional fighter aircraft to the Ukrainian Air Force at this time.
The U.S. hopes to avoid escalating the conflict. It's why President Biden has ruled out a no-fly zone over Ukraine, but President Zelensky warns doing so will cost Ukrainian lives.
Believe me, if it's prolonged this way, yes, you will see they will close the sky, but we'll lose millions of people.
Earlier this week, Russia accused Ukraine of running a U.S.-supported chemical and biological weapons lab. The U.S. denounced the claim and warned that Russia may be laying the groundwork to use such weapons against Ukraine. Heather Sells.
And our senior international correspondent, George Thomas, is joining us now from Ukraine. So, George, what's the likelihood Russia deploys chemical or biological weapons on the battlefield?
Hey, Ephraim, absolutely. That possibility is very real because, look, we have seen this playbook by the Russians. When they escalate, they hope by escalating, they can de-escalate and get people to the negotiating table. We've seen this in Syria. When they were launching their operations in Syria, they used chemical and biological weapons. So there is no doubt in my mind that Russia, in order to press the Zelensky government even more, the potential for them to use chemical and biological weapons is very real.
Frightening. You are preparing to head east tomorrow, close to Kyiv. Tell us about your plans.
Yeah, so Ephraim, right behind me is a van that is chock full of essential critical supplies that's heading to the to Brussels. If you look at a map of Ukraine, it's about southwest rather, of the capital city, Kyiv. And we're going to be taking this, I'm going to be joining this convoy, this humanitarian convoy, heading to the east. In essence, this particular center that we're going to go to is partnering with Orphans Promise, and they've been doing tremendous work over many, many years. Today, Ephraim, at this particular center, there are, on average, each day, close to about 200 refugees that are fleeing from Kyiv and other parts of eastern Ukraine. They're taking these supplies. It's going to be quite a, potentially precarious journey. It typically takes about 3 hours, and we're anticipating at least a 10 to 12-hour journey to get these critical supplies to that center.
Great work indeed. CBN's Operation Blessing is in Poland, helping refugees at the Ukraine-Poland border. How are their efforts going?
Yeah, they are underway. They're in the process of securing a warehouse. They've bought diapers, food, formula, toiletries, medical supplies. They are absolutely gearing up. Talking to Mark Jenkins out of our London office, and he's there with a team from Operation Blessing. They've already deployed, they've assessed the needs, they're making their way to the border, and as refugees come across the Ukrainian border, they're streaming across. Operation Blessing is right there, and they've already identified the partners to work with, those that have been working on the ground, church partners as well as other NGOs. So they have fully mobilized, and we're going to be providing those reports in the days and weeks ahead.
All right, George Thomas, safe travels. We look forward to those reports and look forward to seeing you. Thank you so much for all the great work you're doing out there. As George said, CBN's Operation Blessing is helping out in the Ukrainian crisis. Operation Blessing is on the ground in Poland, providing critical relief to refugees, mainly women and children, flooding across the border in search of safety. If you would like to partner with Operation Blessing in this effort, text OB Crisis to 71777, or you can call 800-730-2537. Your help is desperately needed. Ukrainian Jews fleeing the Russian war continue to arrive in Israel Sunday. Some 300 eligible to immigrate under the law of return landed safely in Tel Aviv. CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell was there to greet one of those flights and heard some of their stories.
Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett and his wife welcomed around 100 Ukrainian Jewish orphans who arrived Sunday. The children, aged 2 to 18, are part of what's dubbed Operation Israeli Guarantee, a promise to help Jews fleeing the fighting. 2 more flights of Ukrainian Jews followed. This flight from Warsaw, Poland is carrying more than 100 immigrants. This is the first round of flights expected to bring thousands of new immigrants from Ukraine in the coming weeks and months.
Efforts are ongoing in order to bring as many people as possible, to save lives and to first get them out of harm's way, and then to take care of everything that needs to happen after that.
Sam Grunberg of Israeli fundraiser Karen Hayesod feels a personal connection to the effort.
As somebody who also made Aliyah myself, it's unbelievable to see what it means to be part of the Jewish nation after thousands of years, to see the solidarity, to see the unity at the darkest moments when we shine brightest, and that's really what we're seeing today.
The arrival of new immigrants is usually a festive celebration, although this homecoming is bittersweet.
That feeling. We have a mom, my husband is in Ukraine. We are okay, but thank you very much for that I and my daughter can be here. And we will wait for good news.
CBN News spoke to 3 women who arrived with their children, but without their husbands.
We have moved from Kyiv a week ago, and we were in Khmelnytska Oblast, but now there are a lot of bombing, and my husband is returning there to help people.
How do you feel right now?
I'm happy that you support us, but I worry about my husband.
Men between the ages of 18 to 60 are not allowed to leave Ukraine because they are being called on to join the army. Olga says the Ukrainian people won't give up.
It's dangerous, it is scared, but people, they are not afraid. and they're ready to struggle to the end, to the victory, not to agree to Putin's demands, but to our victory and to get these Russians from our country.
Yael Eckstein, president of the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, says people arrive with almost no possessions.
I saw so many people landing, coming down those stairs with tears in their eyes, crying. And I've seen that look before, but usually it's tears of happiness, that they're so happy to get home. These are tears of confusion, of pain, of unknown.
For now, there is a lot of uncertainty. Israel has mounted massive rescue operations in the past, and this could prove to be another time when Israel shines as a light to the nations. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Ben Gurion Airport, Tel Aviv.
Here at home, the price of gas has hit another all-time high at $4.32 a gallon. Rising gas prices are expected to drive inflation even higher. Rising prices have state and federal lawmakers looking for solutions. Caitlin Burke shows us how Republicans and Democrats have different approaches to providing relief to the American consumer.
Governors across the country are working to help people with the crushing weight of inflation, even if the fix is only temporary.
Lawmakers are very aware that inflation is eroding people's ability to pay. It's making a big difference for people. And a lot of lawmakers see tax policy as a way to address this problem.
Some governors are proposing tax rebates of up to $500, while others are looking to eliminate the sales tax on groceries or put a freeze on state gas taxes. Jared Walczak with the Tax Foundation says it's a bipartisan effort.
Republican lawmakers have been far more likely to focus on income tax cuts. They talk about the competitive advantage of businesses being able to invest at a lower cost, of driving people into the state rather than out of the state. Democratic lawmakers have been more likely to focus on sales tax rate reductions and providing relief during consumption.
Congress is also working to pass legislation they hope will provide more lasting relief.
You know, when I go fill up my gas tank, it's almost $5, and the price of groceries has gone up. So this is why we need to put more money in the pockets of the working class.
Congressman Ro Khanna told CBN News the Biden administration has a plan, and now it's time for Congress to act.
I mean, the prescription drug bill would be a big deal, to have Medicare negotiate to bring down the cost of prescription drugs. We all know the experience of having to pay too much out of pocket for drugs. The second thing is, again, the earned income tax credit expansion, or getting more money in the pockets of working families. And the third thing is looking at some gas tax holiday.
Republicans argue that Democrats' spending plans and policies are part of the reason for the soaring prices.
They were warned that spending trillions would lead to soaring inflation. They were told that their anti-energy policies would send gas prices to new heights, but they plowed ahead anyway, raising the price at the pump by 50% and pushing inflation to a 40-year high.
Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell says the war in Ukraine could drive inflation even higher. However, the central bank is still planning to move forward with a series of interest rate increases over the next year. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Coming up, a look at how Russian President Vladimir Putin may be looking to expand his war efforts. Please stay with us.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, a new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
Administering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
A 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to CBNNewsChannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News. Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
U.S. intelligence officials say Vladimir Putin is angry over his military's lack of success in Ukraine. They predict the Russian president may soon expand his war efforts. So what are the chances Putin will risk resorting to the use of nuclear weapons? That is one question being explored on this week's episode of The Global Lane. Texas A&M National Security Affairs Director Jason Castillo says the probability is low for now, but the war could escalate.
I'm a little disturbed that you have people calling for a no-fly zone, even a partial no-fly zone, whatever that means. To be clear, a no-fly zone means that we would be preventing Russian planes from flying over Ukraine, which means we would be shooting them down. I bring your attention back to no-fly zones over Kosovo in 1999, Iraq in 2003. A no-fly zone means that the U.S. and Russian forces would be fighting. And I think the scenario that worries most of us is that Russia views Ukraine as a very high stakes contest. And if we enforce a no-fly zone, if we get into a conventional conflict with Russia, there's a good chance that because it's high stakes, they will risk using nuclear weapons. And they could do it in two ways. And by the way, this is very similar to NATO's playbook or its strategy of flexible response during the Cold War. When you're losing conventionally, you can use low-yield nuclear weapons to signal your resolve in a demonstration to show that this has to stop and you're willing to escalate further. More likely and more troubling, I think Russia might use low-yield nuclear weapons not as a demonstration, but to change the balance of power on the conventional battlefield, to offset some of our conventional advantages and put us in a bad spot. Once that happens, we don't have any good historical evidence to rely on to suggest how things stop. In fact, my own view is that once nuclear weapons are used, things are likely to get out of control.
Well, if he were to use nuclear weapons, and he resorted to, say, using battlefield tactical nukes, what would that look like? I mean, my thought on that is, well, wouldn't the fallout from that go into Russia and actually hurt and harm Russian people as well?
The low-yield weapons, let's use a baseline. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were about 15 to 20 kilotons. Some of our strategic nuclear weapons have yields that are much higher, let's say 300 kilotons, without giving exact numbers. These low-yield weapons, and again, we had a similar doctrine. We're talking about 1, 2, 5, 10 kilotons, and you can burst them in the air to reduce fallout. And the effects, because they're low yield, would be more local than they would be blowing back on Russia. Using strategic nuclear weapons would cause fallout and would be detrimental to us and the Russians. But this is a way to try to make them more usable on the battlefield.
Well, he has his nuclear forces on combat ready alert. So do you think that's just saber rattling, or are we really under a threat of limited nuclear warfare here?
Well, I think right now it's a low probability event, and I think the administration understands that the red line here is Ukraine, and that's why they're reluctant to impose a no-fly zone and get involved in the conflict. Interestingly enough, I think NATO understood this, and this is why Ukraine was not put into NATO to begin with, because they understood that the Russians cared greatly about Ukraine. So I think the probability of a nuclear exchange is very low. But if the conflict continues and NATO gets involved, and NATO forces are quite good, especially NATO air power, that could push Putin against the wall. So again, I want to reiterate that I'm very happy that this administration has decided not to get involved militarily.
Jason, what about Poland sending these MiGs to Germany for use by the Ukrainians? Would that escalate?
Yeah, that has the potential to escalate. The Russian military has complained that Ukrainian air forces are landing in Romania and then flying back over to do combat missions over Ukraine. It's not a stretch to see Russian military officials complaining about airframes coming in from Poland. This is an interesting case because, again, I think the administration was reluctant to do it, but the Poles came out in public and said, this is something we want to do, almost forcing our hand. An interesting little tidbit that a colleague of mine reminded me of recently is that in 2009, the Russians ran an exercise called Zapad 2009. And in that exercise, it envisioned a conflict with NATO, and Russia practiced using nuclear weapons against Warsaw.
Okay, Jason Castillo, Director of the National Security Affairs Program at the George Bush School of Government at Texas A&M. We appreciate you. Thank you for spending time with us.
Thanks, Gary.
For a look at other trends and developments in the world around us, be sure to catch the Global Lane on the CBN News Channel. You can watch it this evening at 8:30 Eastern Standard Time on the CBN News Channel or simply by downloading the CBN News app. Still ahead, see how the military is promoting security and increasing good relationships around the world. We've got the story for you right after this.
Before you marry is a bad idea.
Don't tell me there's no such thing as gun violence.
That just depends on your definition of when life begins.
Watch Dan and Dale tackle trending topics that test your faith on the next Faith Wire. Monday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel. The Global Lane takes you around the world, providing facts over fiction.
What might rising trade and geopolitical tensions mean for you on the home front?
With over 45 years of experience, award-winning journalist Gary Lane brings you the truth from a global angle.
What about the issue of immigration?
World news analysis you won't see anywhere else.
And it's all right here on the Global Lane.
Thursday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Turning now to our On the Home Front report, U.S. naval forces from around the world and several international organizations started the Cutlass Express 2022 earlier this year. The Cutlass Express assesses and improves maritime law enforcement capacity, promoting security and increasing relationships between the United States and African nations. Hospital correspondent Randy Hansen shares his mission during an exercise in Kenya.
The training that we conducted in the first part was the tourniquet drill. And tourniquets are very important just because of the massive bleeding. This training is going to be very important because if they are to have a casualty, if one of their comrades does go down, they will know how to help them in a way that they didn't know how to do before. So this is very important for them to know how to do some type of tactical combat care and make sure safety is first, and then they can all make it back. I believe this is a great event that we are conducting, helping our fellow African nations. I think all this has been conducted and handled well, and I believe that we should continue this in the future.
Lower. Check for breathing.
Coming up, we share a heartwarming reunion in the midst of the war in Ukraine. Stay with us.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Wednesday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Tears of joy for an Ohio teacher reunited with her mom and brother who both narrowly escaped the war in Ukraine. Ina Ogle says not only were bombs exploding outside her mother's home, but her brother has cerebral palsy and had to be carried down 8 flights of stairs. A Christian Center for the Disabled helped to get mom and son to Germany. Ina's husband, Dylan, was waiting for them so he could bring them back to Ohio. They're now praying for others still trapped in Ukraine. Time now for your Thursday Thankful. I want to leave you with this prayer of gratitude. Father, thank you for your peace. Even in troubling times, I take comfort knowing you're still in control. I may not always understand, but I must always trust you. With that prayer, I encourage you to go through this day with an attitude of gratitude. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. You can always find more of our programs on the CBN News Channel. You can also find them online anytime at cbnnews.com. Let us know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. Email us, newswatch@cbn.com. You can also reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We'll see you right back here, same time tomorrow.